Sam Harris is back in his usual flow of things. We all remember in the post-9/11 era, there was this rise of new atheism. You had people like Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens. And look, I'd be lying if I said I didn't agree with a lot of what they wrote. I mean, The God Illusion, I think, was a great book from Richard Dawkins. He was like the least political of them. But Christopher Hitchens, God is Not Great. I didn't like that book as much as The God Illusion, but he used to be a socialist, and then he became a pretty ardent neocon in his older years, and he was for the war in Iraq. He kind of like was defending Bush when nobody else was defending Bush. So Hitchens kind of lost his way. And Sam Harris, he was hyper political and wrote a lot about like foreign policy stuff. Torture, of course, he wrote about, and he defended it in during the war on terror in the wake of 9/11. And now he's hitting his stride again, hitting a lot of those same talking points with what's happening in Gaza at the moment. And man, it is hard to listen to. Like the stuff he's saying, the analysis is so incredibly simplistic. And I don't mean that in a positive way. It's ironic because he would accuse others of being like morally blind or morally confused. I think he is the height of moral confusion. So here he is. He's going to make quite a claim here about Hamas. And of course, the Nazis get dragged into it. Listen to this.
Overwhelming majority of people who are this confused about how to live good lives are Islamic extremists. And the worst of these are jihadists. Now, Hamas is a jihadist organization.
Right off the bat here, that's not really the full picture, is it, Sam? It's not enough to just say, well, Hamas are jihadists, full stop. Like, that is purposefully leaving out a lot of nuance and complexity and detail, right? We're clear on that, right? Like an actual jihadist organization, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, their goal is global caliphate. That's their goal. That is not Hamas's goal. They want Palestine to be a country, and they want it to be governed by Islamic law. That's true. But they don't have global ambitions. In the same way, like the Houthis, for example, putting them on the terror list, it was preposterous because they're not going to do terror attacks against the West because they're trying to form a global caliphate. That's not what they do. They're not like ISIS. They're not like Al-Qaeda. He's purposefully glossing over very real differences, right? But again, follow the thread here. Follow the thread because he says, Islamic extremists are morally confused, but the worst of them are jihadists. And he says Hamas is a jihadist organization. That's what he says. Now wait until you hear the rest.
In my view, that's all we need to know about it. The question of how it got that way.
That's hilarious, buddy. That's all we need to know. Don't look any deeper. Don't look any deeper. That's it. That's it.
Is fundamentally uninteresting, as is the question of why so many Palestinians have come to support it.
Yeah, gee, I wonder. I wonder why Palestinians would support their militant hardliners. Tough one to figure out. I'm sure it couldn't be that Palestinian babies are getting carpet bombed on a daily basis and Israel is bombing hospitals and schools and churches and mosques and marketplaces and factories and houses and all sorts of civilian infrastructure. It couldn't be that when you get barbaric, savage, hardline, far-right policies from their enemy, that they run into the arms of their hard-right, barbaric, savage, hardliners on their side. Can't be that, right? Can't be a perfectly natural reaction that everybody has. Like after 9/11, when the U.S. got attacked, and George W. Bush's approval rating was like fucking 90%. Turns out violence begets violence. Turns out hard-right politics begets hard-right politics from the other side. That's what happened. Oh my God. I haven't even gotten to the big part yet. Sorry, I'm getting way too triggered. Here, let's keep going. Follow the thread. Hamas is jihadist and...
As is the question of why so many Palestinians have come to support it. It would be like asking in 1941 how the SS became so radicalized. And why do so many millions of Germans support it? That's an interesting question now, right now that Nazism has been defeated. But in 1941, there was nothing to do but kill Nazis. I feel exactly the same way about jihadists. In fact, jihadists are worse than Nazis, in my view. They don't have the same power the Nazis had in the 30s and 40s, which is a very good thing, and we should keep it that way. but their ideology is actually worse. Jihadism is essentially Nazism plus an expectation of paradise. It's Nazism plus religious fanaticism. Nazism plus an eagerness to be martyred and to see their children martyred. There are many differences between Nazism and jihadism, of course, but they only make the Nazis look comparatively benign.
Hamas are jihadists, and jihadism makes Nazism look, what do you say, relatively benign was the phrasing? Let me hear it again.
There are many differences between Nazism and jihadism, of course, but they only make the Nazis look comparatively benign.
Comparatively benign. Nazis are comparatively benign to Hamas. Sam, do you have any thoughts on 41,496 Palestinians being killed by Israel? 37,676 of them being civilians, far over 90% civilian death rate. By the way, Hamas had a lower civilian death rate. They killed, depending on which numbers you believe, anywhere between 55% and 70% civilians. That's the ballpark. Israel has killed more civilians as a raw number and as a percentage. Any thoughts on that? Any thoughts on 15,370 children being killed by Israel? Any thoughts on Israel injuring 77,000 Palestinians, killing 136 journalists, which is the most deadly conflict for journalists literally in human history? Any thoughts on Israel bombing Gaza back to the Stone Age to the point where 2 million of the 2.3 million people in Gaza are now homeless? Any thoughts on when Israel announced a medieval-style siege, which is by definition collective punishment, where they said we're cutting off food, fuel, and water and electricity to everybody in Gaza because of the actions of Hamas? How many Hamas members are there? 30,000. How many people in Gaza? 2.3 million. They said because of the actions of 30,000, we are going to starve 2.3 million. You want to make any comparisons to Nazis now? How about that comparison? Are you going to address any of these facts on the ground? The 122,500 homes that have been completely destroyed, or the 269,700 homes that have been partially destroyed? You want to talk about that? You want to talk about 443 schools being attacked by Israel? You want to talk about the wholesale destruction of all of these schools in Gaza? Every one, many of them meticulously blown up in controlled demolitions. Not even a whiff of, oh, there's a Hamas command and control center in something. In all 443 schools? How about what we covered the other day? That around the Al-Shifa complex, where Israel did a massacre and killed 13 children on purpose, they were also looting and stealing from the houses around. Were they looting and stealing things like gold necklaces and things of that nature because that's their way of defending themselves against Hamas? 647 mosques bombed, 3 churches bombed, 869 healthcare professionals attacked, including 349 of them killed. Remember when everybody was debating that one hospital, which was the first hospital to be bombed? Was it a misfired Palestinian weapon or was it Israel? Well, here we are. 29 hospitals have been bombed later, and people like Sam are not really talking much about debating, hey, who's attacking the... What's it? Even if I grant you that first one, which I don't, 28 were bombed by Israel. You want to talk about Nazis? You want to talk about Nazis? You want to talk about comparisons to Nazism? Look, here's the difference between me and Sam. I will gladly and freely admit Hamas are terrorists. You can make a comparison between Hamas and Nazis. I think that's fair. I think anybody that targets civilians on purpose are the scum of the earth. That is the definition of terrorism. That is evil. That is immoral. That is unethical. That is wrong. Anytime anybody attacks civilians on purpose, it is wrong. Israel does that. The IDF does that even more than Hamas. So if you want to make Nazi comparisons, I'm comfy making those comparisons all day long. Yeah, Hamas are like Nazis. Israel is even more like Nazis. If you look at all this death and all this devastation, if you look at flower massacre after flower massacre, if you look at people coming out waving white flags who get gunned down and murked anyway, you look at the carpet bombing of children, and you say, it was all an accident. We thought they were all Hamas. It's gotten to the point that is so laughable, over 90% of people don't believe you. Anybody who looks honestly at the evidence, 99.9% of those people wouldn't believe you. They think you're morally blind. You're morally confused. You are phenomenally biased. That's what they think. And they're right. It's so funny. He says stuff like there's moral confusion all over the place. That defines him perfectly. Saying Nazis are comparatively benign to Hamas. That's what he said. And won't even engage on this part of it. To the extent he would, we already know. We already know everything he'd say. Is there collateral damage sometimes in war? Yeah, it's unfortunate. But the difference is they don't mean it. And Hamas does. And therefore, they're much more moral. And obviously, I mean, look at gay people are treated way better in Israel than they're treated in Gaza. So therefore, these are more enlightened Western values that they live by. Like, we've heard all these things so many over and over and over. Nobody is buying the bullshit anymore. They're just not. They're just not. If you think this isn't on purpose, I got a bridge to sell you. Because you are the most gullible motherfucker on planet Earth. They're doing it on purpose. It is a genocide. It is an ethnic cleansing. Don't take my word for it. Take their own words for it. Remember, we're the forces of light versus the forces of darkness. Remember when Benjamin Netanyahu brought up the story of Amalek? Remember when they said there are no civilians in Gaza? They're all guilty enough. They could have couped Hamas if they want to. They didn't. So they're all guilty enough. From the day they announced the total siege, punishing 2.3 million people for the actions of 30,000, they were making it crystal clear. We view you as all the same. We view you as all guilty, and we're going to treat you as such. An entire group of people, women, children, all of them. That's as Nazi-like as it gets, dude. But he's not going to engage on that. He's not. Or he'll go to the standard talking points, which have the IQ of a mosquito. But here we are. So anyway, there's Sam Harris for you. Still up to his same stuff. Man, it sure does ring a hell of a lot more hollow now, given this set of facts, doesn't it? Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now.